Hey, welcome everyone to the Weekly Whistle, March 30th, 2026. I'm Lisa Azzarelli, and I'm here with the awesome co-host, Vinny Marino.
Hey guys, how's it going?
So here we are. We're presenting to you from the first time, and for the first time, we're going to discuss some crazy things today that Vinny's going to touch upon. But I'll give you a little bit of my background. So Lisa Azzarelli, educator for over 30 years, also in administration, and also some work for the government. But aside from that, the things that we discuss cover everything in our lives that impacts and affects us. We touch on news and other topics that are important, and we kind of break them down for you from a law enforcement lens and from an educational lens, and we give you balanced feedback. Blow that whistle, Vin.
Yeah, well, what do I got going on? 3 years as a local police officer, 6 years with the Secret Service, and 15 with Homeland Security. Retired in 2023. I went back under the Rehard Annuitant program for a few months. I still have my contacts. I still have my friends in the game. They can send me some info when they're permitted to. And really, we're just hoping to provide some common sense discussions to politics, current events, and conspiracies. You know, everything from Bigfoot to Iran and everything between. So, yeah,
I love it. It's so
yeah,
much fun, and it's awesome to be here with you and doing this together.
yeah,
So I am zooming in right now from the state of Florida. Vin,
yeah.
you're
I'm still in Long Island.
all
Yep.
right.
Actually,
So
it's
coming
nice
from
out. It's nice out today, so I'm happy.
Oh, thank goodness. After the winter that Long Island, New York has seen, oh,
Yeah,
let that sun
yeah. It
shine.
was it was brutal.
So basically, we're bringing it to you right from the East Coast. So we got the top of the East Coast, we got the bottom of the East Coast, and everything in between.
Right.
What we want to share with you today are a couple of different topics. We know that there is stuff going down with HHS, TSA. We know everyone's been frustrated with the flights. We're going to touch on that. We also have an awesome guest today, John Gilmore. He is a fabulous man who has led the movement on autism and bringing much to the surface regarding vaccines. He has also played a role in RFK Jr.'s administration, and he's going to give us all of what's updated and new to learn about medical exemptions and actions that we all need to take to better prepare and inform ourselves. And then aside from those two great topics, we're also going to explore Easter week because that has become a big issue, especially now at the time as we
Right.
approach Easter. But some news coming out of Huckabee's office as he is the Israeli human, what do we call him? Not human relations, but he is the
Is the ambassador?
ambassador. He's the
Yes.
ambassador for Israel. And he had some things that he was not happy about regarding Israel and the ability for private prayer there at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So we'll touch upon all that, maybe some other crazy stuff that's showing up. We know that there was a DUI of somebody very famous, so we might have to hit on that as well.
Yep.
But we'll get to a lot of things. No King's rallies. I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to cover. So where should we begin? What do you say, Ben?
Oh my God. What do you want to talk about? I mean, geez. I mean, how about RFK? What's going on with him? I mean, that's a lot going on, even with him, just to
I
start.
like it.
I mean,
Let's start there.
I still can't get past that awesome intro. I think that was so cool. In the back of my head, it's run and run. But yeah, listen, RFK has been in the news. Look, I'm not a doctor, neither is he, but I'm kind of one of those guys who likes to challenge the system. And you know what? He's challenging a lot. He's challenging a lot of people. I kind of dig it. I mean, what are your thoughts?
So absolutely, here we go, right? So the thing with RFK Jr. is almost like I feel as though his time has come. Let's put it that way. This man has suffered through a lot of devastating grief in the political realm as far as his family is concerned, especially the loss of his father, the loss of his uncle, over very concerning in ways that were concerning, right? And so then he tries to come up. He's been, in the Children's Health Defense, which is his organization, defending the rights of all Americans in the health sphere. And
Right.
so he's done a lot of great legal work and has accomplished like amazing feats. And then we see that he runs for president. And what do we learn? That Biden won't even give him security. Vinny, tell us about that. How does that even happen? That is your venue. That's your field. How could he not have given him security?
I, I don't know. I don't know if he's the only one that can make that decision or not. I mean, everybody at that level, these top secret clearances and SCIs, they're all on a need to know basis. Now, that doesn't mean he can sit in a military operation and listen, but for the love of God, when you're talking, his position and he's in, he needs to have that clearance. And maybe because he's bucking the system, back, in the 70s, good cholesterol was 300. Now it's 200. Now you're forced to basically, you're force fed a Corvustat. You know what I mean? So like if he's bucking these systems and saying, hey, slow down with this stuff, it's going to create a problem. And maybe he was just looking for him to leave. I don't know. It's just
Mm,
so bizarre.
mm. I
It's
mean,
so
just with the
bizarre.
history alone of the assassinations of his father and his uncle, you would think better of that, especially since he's been a Democrat and his
Right.
family is a notorious Democrat
Right.
family. I just thought that was shocking. But then lo and behold, what do we learn? That he really wants to make a difference in the what has been going on in all of the regulatory agencies. And that's where RFK comes in. And he wanted to take a sledgehammer to it. And I think that
Right.
that's most
Right.
likely what really stirred the pot, and where I think you're right, Vin, they
Yeah.
didn't want him to
Yeah.
do it. And so an allegiance between him and Trump turned out to be a pretty,
Pretty.
effective deal, if you ask
Right.
me.
And he is a Kennedy, so he has a past. Like he has, things in his background, just like everybody else. But we were all, told a lie. We were fed a lie with the food pyramids. Oh, you got to have grains, you got to have breakfast, you have to do. You go over to Italy, right? You eat pasta and their bread and their wine, you feel fantastic. There's over 1,000 ingredients in Europe that are banned from that they ban that we consume on a daily basis. It's crazy. So I
So
could
true.
understand. Yeah, I mean, it's based on greed. This country's built on greed, and this is a prime example of it.
Right. Right. And you know what? That's what it comes down to, right? Greed. And so all of these pharmaceutical companies and major food producing corporations have really put their, bottom line first. And
Right,
instead of providing things that are nutritious, it's all, GMO. Where can we cut corners at?
right,
How can we even addict, right, people
right.
to certain foods? I think there was a
Right.
movie regarding Frosted Flakes or something. It was called Frosted, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it had the comedian Jerry Seinfeld in it. I
Right.
believe I really have to catch it. So excuse me, I didn't watch it yet, but I did see some coming attractions for it. And it was exactly about that.
Yeah.
Purposefully trying to addict the
Yeah.
American consumer.
Yeah.
That's
And look at the
crazy.
look at the food coloring that we've used just for that, that added attraction to that food. It's insane.
Right.
It's just insane. So good for him. And you know me, I'm not a big conspiracy guy. I try to debunk it as quick as I can. Sometimes when you send me a text and you're like, well, what about this? And I try and get rid of it quick. I try to dispel it. But you know what? With this kind of thing, I'm kind of onto it a little bit. I kind of feel like he's barking and some people don't like it. Some companies don't like it.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm really looking forward to our guest being able to tell us more about that, where that comes from and why it happens, because we know what happened in 2020. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing conspiracy about that. Every
Right.
household has their own story,
Right.
whether it just be, from the stay-at-home moms, God bless, taking care of her kids, to high-end CEOs, student athletes, sports athletes. I mean,
Right.
everyone was impacted, either, by the vax itself, or, by the lack of the closure of schools, or
Right.
by the, varied issues that they had learned afterwards with the studies, and Fauci's involvement in some, testing, or gain of function, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera. The
Right.
list just goes on and on.
It does,
What an
and
eye opener.
it was a knee jerk reaction. I understand the reasoning to push a vaccine. I mean, people and they were legitimately dying at that point. But look, if I didn't take that vaccination, I would have been fired. And one of my friends, one of my coworkers, who I love him to death, I talk to him all the time. He is so screwed up over that vaccination. He was in the hospital for months with high fevers. He developed a rare tumor in his leg that like two doctors in the country had to operate. It was just, and he's still having these problems today. So, look, we were faced with a difficult situation back then, but there was something about it that was like, hey, let's push this on there as quick as they can. And I think it didn't turn out right for a lot of people.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely not. And what's crazy in the education field, what we see is that the students now, when they go for their pediatric evaluations, especially student athletes, now they have to have heart monitoring before they're allowed to play sports. That was never done before
Yeah.
the COVID situation, but because of the pericarditis and myocarditis
Yeah.
affiliated with the shot, all of these, parents who ran out and made sure that their kids were vaccinated for protection. This situation now is that their children are getting tested to make sure that they don't have heart conditions. It's wild to consider that. And on that note, I would love to bring in John at this point. John Gilmore,
Yeah.
founder of the Autism Action Network, also an appointee in RFKJ's administration. John has done fabulous work. He rallies at Albany at the Capitol and makes the public aware of upcoming bills and issues that the legislation is, coming, it kind of does under the table, so to speak. But I would really love John to speak more to that and share his journey.
Yeah.
John, it's so great to have you with us.
Well, I'm really glad to be here, Lisa. How you
Hey,
doing, Vinny?
sir.
Nice to
Hey,
meet you.
sir. Yeah,
Thanks
same
for
here.
having
Thank
me.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming on. This is awesome.
Yeah, it is.
So, John, I mentioned some of your background already. You have an extensive bio of your work within, especially vaccines and autism. Your son was a victim of a
Great.
vaccine injury. Can you speak to us about your journey and what has gotten you here today?
Sure. I mean, the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and which I've been doing for quite a while, is when my younger son Luke was an infant, he got 3 rounds of vaccines, and every time he had a round of vaccines, he was clearly injured. His development and his health went off in completely different directions, not the right directions, every time he had a shot. He had his first round of shots at 60 days. Okay, maybe I should explain this because it kind of says a lot about the world. He did not get the birth hepatitis B shot. All right. And the reason why he did not get the birth hepatitis B shot is because um, in the late 90s, my son is 26 years old, so he was born in 2000, right? In 1999, the CDC did an internal study to look at what effect getting the hepatitis B shot um, with mercury in it, which they had in hepatitis B shots at the time, what happened if you gave it right at birth or if you delayed it 3 months, right? And what they found with just a 3 month delay, those who got it on the day of birth had over 10 times as much autism as the kids who got it 3 months later. Okay. This was an
Wow.
internal CDC
Wow.
study. They hired a Belgian epidemiologist named Thomas Verstraeten to do it. Back in those days with FOIL, you could actually get documents, and I think some were released. So we've got the documents laying it all out. And what happened is that the federal government, instead of like doing the right thing, they got all the basically leaders of the vaccine industry and the agencies and the universities, it got them all together in Simpsonwood Retreat Center down by Atlanta and said, "What are we going to do, boys?" And they decided to cover it up. Right? No one heard about this, right, until we got a hold of it, right? So what they did do, though, is they said, well, for a temporary period, until we can get some shots out there that don't have mercury in them, the hepatitis B for birth, they just weren't going to give them, right? So that little window is where my son was born, right? But nonetheless, he got that, and he got a whole bunch of other shots when he was 60 days old. He stopped nursing. He didn't want to be held. He developed asthma. He developed eczema for the first 2 years of his life. After that, he looked like we poured boiling water on him. And then about 6 months later, he got another round because we got suspicious, but we were still sort of, believing right at that point. Same thing, not quite as severe, but clearly we saw changes in him in his health. Um, he was missing developmental milestones. And then when he was about a year old, he had another group. And what happened then, I think just about everybody has heard this story, whether they want to admit it or not. At that point, he got a couple shots. Within 24 hours, he developed a really high fever. And then when the fever was gone, he was a different kid. Okay. And he developed all sort of the classic symptoms of autism. Right. We'll get into that in a minute. But basically, what that meant, all of a sudden, it seemed like he was deaf. He stopped making eye contact. He would stare at the ceiling fans for hours. He would look out the window and watch a tree moving in the wind for hours. He lost his sense of pain. He was starting to walk at that point. I remember really distinctly. He was like running as fast as he could down the hallway and smacked right into the wall. Right. Well, a 1-year-old would have screamed his head off. Right. He just kind of fell back on the floor, kind of shook himself, got up, and went off. He just didn't seem to have any sense of pain. And we soon found out that these are just classic symptoms of regressive autism. Right? And I think with we can get into autism that goes along, but I think what autism basically is, it's a label that's applied for a very wide range of completely different neurological conditions that result in sort of communication difficulties, right? It's kind of like cancer, right? There's a zillion different things that cause cancer. You have cells that grow too much, but it's not the same thing. I mean, I got basal cells in my forehead because I'm an Irish guy who hangs out at the beach, right? Frozen off, you're good, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the same thing as stage 4 pancreatic cancer, right? But it's both cancer. That's kind of the same thing with autism. So that kind of set us on the journey of just like figuring out what was going on with my kid, every stage of his life. We ran into barriers of various kinds. His neurologist said we really should get an MRI. We couldn't get MRI. The insurance wouldn't cover it. They said, oh, well, we don't do that for autism, which led to like years of fighting to get medical coverage and insurance coverage and so on for people with autism diagnoses. And I also got very involved in vaccine rights about that time. I've been basically doing that kind of work ever since. At the time, I was actually a professor at an art school and continued doing that. And then about 10 years ago, I basically just started doing sort of advocacy work on these issues full time, which I've been doing ever since.
Yeah.
And just to kind of tie it in with some of the stuff you talked about before, I met Bobby Kennedy, 20 years ago. He started getting interested. It was autism moms and dads, mostly moms like me. He tells this story a lot that he would go around. He was, probably one of the leading environmentalists in the country at the time. And every time he would do a speech or something like that, he would be pursued by these autism moms to talk to him about vaccines. And eventually he sort of started listening to them, reading their documents, and he realized there was something very, very serious going on, right? And so I've known Bobby for quite a while. We've worked on a bunch of different projects over the years. And a couple of years ago, when he decided to run for president, I was one of the people who put together what's called a Super PAC to support his candidacy. And so we were doing that for, I guess close to 2 years. And then, once he sort of teamed up with President Trump, we continued doing that for the rest of the time as well. And so election's over. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm back to working at the Autism Action Network. And right now, this is fairly typical. This is one of the sort of the busiest periods politically in New York. I live in New York on Long Island, and I do a lot of work in Albany right now. And there's some really, really crazy bills up in Albany right now that we could talk to about. Anyway, that's who I am. That's how I got here.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy. But John, let me ask you this. I was doing my research before the show, and they say 60 to 90% of autism comes from a gene mutation from either being inherited or spontaneous. But then do you feel that that's accurate, or do you feel at this point it's more spontaneous? Because then you look at like a country like Japan, who has a very low rate, but yet their lifespan is like 10 years ahead of the United States.
Oh, well, there's a real problem with the whole claim that autism is genetic. All right. For one thing, we've gone from it being about 1 in 10,000 kids, like in 1985, to the most recent numbers are 1 out of 31 kids. It's 1 out of 22 in California. And in California, there's for every girl with autism, there's probably 4 or 5 boys. The autism rate in California now, and it's probably true a lot of other places as well, is 1 out of 12 kids, right?
Yeah.
Now, that gets a little complicated because one thing that has gone on, and it's true, is that the definition of autism has been really watered down over the years. So there's a lot of people who are clearly not. My son does not speak. He needs a lot of assistance doing daily activities and so on. But with my son, it's like clearly he has very severe neurological motor damage. In the last few years, he's been able to communicate using a spelling board, basically just spelling out words, right? So he can communicate, he can spell, okay? He understands language and grammar and everything. It's just that his body is so damaged, he can't really, he can't speak. He's got maybe 10 words. And the reason we know it's going up is because the number of people who are as badly impacted as my son keeps on going up, and it's going up exponentially, right? You know, they say, oh, we just didn't notice it before, right? Oh, this is sort of a socially awkward kid. Well, that socially awkward kid is not my nonverbal 26-year-old son, right? You can't, you could not spend, more than a couple of minutes with my son without realizing that he's seriously impacted, right? So they play a lot of games, all right? No one will ever say that we're in an epidemic of autism. At some level, I think everybody knows it, okay? All you got to do is talk to somebody who's been teaching for 30 years, right? And they know how many, there you go, right? We know how many kids we had with issues 30 years ago.
Right.
And it's a fraction of what it is now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we've got this immense problem. Now, to get back to you talking about the genetics, all right? This is something I've spent a lot of time with, right? Now you got to realize that the National Institute of Health for almost 20 years was under the control of Francis Collins. You may recall Francis Collins and Tony Fauci were like this, okay? And they clearly made it their mission that autism rates are not going up, and they decided it's going to be genetic, and by God, they were going to prove it. The problem that they have is they started looking out for the autism gene, and they couldn't find it. Okay, and they said, well, maybe it's the autism genes. Maybe it's 2 or 3 genes working together, right? Well, they really couldn't find that. Then they said 5. Well, maybe it's 5 genes working together. Now what they're saying is literally it's thousands of genes working together. Plus, you referred to the new mutations, right? They call them de novo mutations. That means not an inherited genetic thing. It means there's some sort of genetic damage, and it's new, right? Now they're saying that's causing it. But when you start breaking it down, there is not a single gene or combination of genes that they have been able to locate that if a person has that gene or gene combination are always autistic, right? Now take Down syndrome, for example, right? If you have that X chromosome, everybody has Downs. Okay, that's a distinct genetic inherited disorder, right? There's nothing like that in autism. We can't find one that always is determinative. And they have been able to locate one specific sort of model group of genes that they think is causing it that is statistically significant. Okay. And American science, if it's not statistically significant, it's not real. Right. So what they do is they sort of lump all these things together, none of which are really statistically significant, sort of throw it in a pile and say, oh, we're finding this in 30% of the people with autism. What they don't tell you is they find the same combination in all kinds of people who don't have it, right? So, the whole genetic thing has really been a dead end. That has been almost exclusively the only thing that they've looked at for the last 20 years as a cause of autism, right?
Right.
For every dollar we've spent on environmental factors, and there's lots of evidence that indicates many things can cause a neurological damage that we call autism. There's drugs we know that can cause it. Okay, there is strong evidence, like the president was talking about last year, that Tylenol in pregnancy can cause it. Pesticides can cause it, right? This is just, there's solid evidence for all this. Infections can cause it, right? One of the things they used to say about measles, they don't say this anymore, is that if you have measles, it can also cause autism. And the reason measles and other infections cause autism is basically it turns into a cephalitis. You get a brain infection, okay?
Mm.
The brain infections damages the brain, and you have that neurological damage we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
They don't really talk about the measles causing autism anymore because it is a known fact with vaccines that if the disease can cause something, if it is a live vaccine, it can cause the exact same thing, right? And one of the business suspects for as a cause of autism, and I'm sure eventually we're going to show without question that the measles, the MMR vaccine causes autism. And again, that shouldn't be a mystery because, as we've said, they've always said that if measles causes it, the measles virus will cause it too. All right, they don't talk about that anymore.
Right.
Well,
So,
talking about in regards to the measles, isn't that what caused New York? That was the excuse of the legislators to rescind religious exemption in New York State in 2019,
right,
correct?
right,
I remember, John, because you're fighting so hard to get that restored. And I know the Children's Health Defense as well
right,
has worked diligently. And we had some reversal. There were, I think, predominantly 6 states that did not have religious exemption, and New York became one of them in 2019 after we became a one-party Democrat state. And so
right,
that was one of the things they ran for right away, was to pull back religious exemption, leaving like approximately 26,000 students who were unvaccinated now scrambling what to do to still receive their public education.
right.
So if that wasn't a chokehold by government, I don't know what was. But however, there was this very controversial moment, and I think we have an asset for it with Carl Heastie, a photo. If we could pull that up.
Oh, you got that?
Yeah. There
Wow.
it is. So this is the New York Assembly Committee with Health Chairman Gottfried, and you can see Assembly Speaker Heastie right behind him, arms folded. Now this goes into a video. Thank you for that asset. So this goes into a video also that follows it, in which Heastie, who probably should not have even been in the room, okay, with the Health Committee, but right there, just in that gesture, was influencing the votes. And they did not get the votes to remove religious exemption. It was basically one person in particular that didn't go for it. And then the video shows that he gets up, calls that gentleman over. The
Yep.
gentleman walks over with like a skulking, nervous look, and Carl Heastie says a few words to him. And the next thing you know, they sit back down and do a revote, and religious exemption is pulled. It was a
By one vote.
shocking. I saw the video. It was shocking to see it, basically on one vote. Yeah, and so Heastie then afterwards was believed to have had some affiliation, engagement, or whatever, a possible supporter or profit from a large pharmaceutical company. Afterwards, that we will need to still confirm, but there seemed to be that play going on at the time, and they were using measles as just a scare tactic for the public to
Yes, they were.
rescind it. It's astonishing that they did that again for most likely self-benefit. And now here we are 6 years later. And after COVID, I mean, Vinny and I were talking about this before the show, that COVID really opened a lot of eyes,
Sure
because
did.
they turned around and forced that vaccination and frightened so many families, especially student athletes, which all of the myocarditis and pericarditis started coming out like crazy. And now we're required to give them, the phys ed department is required to make sure that their pediatric visits include a heart exam now at this point. EKG has to be on the phys ed forms for them to participate in sports. It's just
Seriously? They got
wild.
to do an
Yes.
EKG?
Correct.
Oh my
Correct.
goodness,
It's
I had no
wild.
idea.
So all of that being said, I know that on the 21st, you were in Albany. You did another rally regarding two bills that Hochul is trying to push with unlicensed vaccines in New York. We don't have too much time left. If you, in 2 minutes, can you sum up what that's about, please?
Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Basically, what's going on is Hochul and a lot of other deep blue states with deep blue governors are basically trying to do whatever they can to stop the reforms that are coming out of Washington from Kennedy and the Trump administration. Right. Just quickly, at the beginning of the year, Kennedy made just an amazing move. Right. Essentially, the United States requires more shots for our kids than any other country in the world. He said, we're going to do what Denmark does. Right. And basically, 2/3 of the doses of vaccines that were recommended by the CDC up to that point, they basically pulled their recommendation. All right. They said if a kid and the parent, in consultation with the child's parent, thinks the child should get it, by all means get it. It'll be covered by insurance and everything. But we don't think all kids should just automatically get it. And that was with flu shots, COVID shots, and so on. Right. This is a huge economic issue as well as a public health issue, right? And the vaccine cartel is reacting ferociously, right? They're trying to stop everything they possibly can. And they're doing this in a bunch of states, and they're doing it in New York. And so basically what they're doing in New York and these other states is they're doing a power grab. The states are pretending that they can just take over completely the vaccine program by the state by itself. They're telling themselves that they could ignore what HHS is doing and what the CDC is doing and this board called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which is obscure, but it's very, very important because it determines what is required or recommended by the CDC, I should say. And also it decides what shots are going to get a legal immunity. A lot of people don't know this, but if you get a vaccine or your child gets a vaccine and is injured or killed by it, you cannot sue. The only thing you can do is apply to this program to see if you can get compensated. That's it, right?
It's crazy.
Which is just amazing if you think about it, right? This doesn't apply to drugs. It doesn't apply to any other product. It doesn't apply to any other service. But a doctor in the United States will not give a kid a vaccine unless they've got complete legal liability immunity. What does that tell you, right? So anyway, what there's been a bunch of bills being thrown in that basically consolidate the power over the vaccine program in New York into the governor. There's like close to 10 of them at this point. What just happened last week, though, is a new bill was introduced that was actually requested by the governor. The governor talked to the Senate and Assembly and said, introduce this bill for me, right? And they did. And not only does this bill consolidate the power to decide what's going to be the recommended vaccines into the governor, it also, this is just crazy. This is just absolutely crazy. But they eliminated the language in New York law that requires that the vaccines given in the United States, or here in New York, I should say, are licensed to be sold in the United States. And the only entity that can license vaccines in the United States is the federal government. Just like a drug, you have to go to the FDA and be approved. They deliberately took out the FDA language.
So state overriding federal.
That's what they seem to think.
That's crazy. You know? That is crazy, John.
I call it the vaccine confederacy. Because they're acting like the South did in 1860. They think that they're going to pull out of the, do their own thing and tell the federal government that we're not going to obey federal law anymore, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's exactly the attitude they have. Wow. It'll be really interesting to see where it goes, but there's just all kinds of things they have not thought about. For one thing, according to federal law, if a vaccine is not approved by that thing I mentioned before, the ACIP,
CIP.
it's not going to get paid for by Medicare or Medicaid or any other federal insurance program, and those federal dollars pay for almost 60% of all the shots given to kids in New York, right? So they're probably, if you put it all together, we're talking somewhere between 500 million and $1 billion a year spent on that they're going to have to come up with. And it also, unless a shot is approved by the ACIP, the manufacturer and the doctors do not get their liability insurance protection, right?
Wow.
And I assure you that if a shot does not have liability protection, not a doctor in New York is going to give it, right?
Yeah.
So they're not really thinking very clearly, and they've got this other thing that if they want, the governor will be allowed to pick any sort of medical organization they want in the United States or the world. And if it's okay with any one of them, it's okay to use in New York.
Yeah.
So for example, they could pick a vaccine made in China, that's approved by the Chinese medical establishment, all right, that is not licensed for use in the FDA. And the way they've written this bill is it would be okay to require that for New York kids to go to school, for example.
My goodness.
It's totally
crazy.
insane. It is.
It's frightening. It's really frightening.
It is.
You want to talk about no kings? What are we talking about here?
Right.
You got to remember, you might remember this, Lisa. Last year, what these yo-yos up in Albany tried to do is they tried to pass a bill that would allow a child of any age to consent to any medical procedure, service, or product without parental knowledge or consent. It was called A6761. People don't believe me when I tell you this.
Right.
But this was a real bill. And Amy Pollan, the chair of the Assembly Health Committee, okay, who is also the sponsor of the bill I was just telling you about, she was sponsored to that bill last year as well. Okay. These are the people who are making medical decisions for me and you and our kids.
Right.
And if we don't go along with it, we lose our right for them to go to school.
Exactly. It sounds to me like they're just working in collusion. John, you are an amazing guest. You are a wealth of knowledge.
That was incredible.
I mean, and we really thank you so much for helping us to blow that whistle, okay, here on the Weekly Whistle.
Thank you so
we
much.
have your information down at the bottom, www.autismactionnetwork.org. This is John Gilmore that was with us today. We appreciate you, John, for all you do. Thank you.
Thanks, you, John. Fabulous. Thank you.
Pleasure being here.
Yeah.
Well.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness. I know our viewers are going to be, that information coming in is wild. But he breaks it down so well, and I love just his calm, voice. I mean, this man, he
could talk for hours.
Really, which I would love. But I know that we do have some other big topics that we have to touch upon, because Vin, talk to us about what is going on with the agent who shot him or herself. Was it a female or was it a male?
You know what? Look. In the airport on Biden's detail, on Jill Biden's detail, it's not an accidental discharge. It's a negligent discharge. The only way that weapon goes off is if you pull the trigger, or if the trigger gets pulled. With the exception of the Sig Sauer P320, which had massive amounts of problems due to internal, failures. That's, we don't know exactly what took place, but, that's. It just sucks that they get, you get a person like Susan Crabtree, who just writes horrendous articles when there's a Secret Service failure. Okay. Never puts anything good out there. And these things get publicized. And the reason why it gets publicized is because, a few months ago, we had an agent on the vice president's detail that had a date with an undercover agent, undercover reporter started giving her all classified information.
Oh my God.
And it's like, oh my God, what are you doing?
No.
I mean, listen, I was in that job. I spent a third of my career in there. Like, that's one thing you just don't do. No. And I have stories I could sit and, I could write 7 books, and each Secret Service agent can write, a different book.
Let's go, Vin. We need those books, Vin.
But, it's just, I feel bad. Look, there is unfortunately, this started in the Obama administration. He had a hiring freeze on all agencies for a couple of years. When you had an agency that had a little bit of a retention problem, then you add 2 years of no hiring, it creates a huge retention problem. And then what happens after that? And then you start lowering your standards because you still need the bodies.
Right.
Okay. And it's a problem. And you can see it at the Butler, at Butler, for God's sakes. Let's bring it out. Everybody rips
break
on
that
the Secret
down
Service,
because a lot of people, I think, are very misinformed about what actually happened in Butler. The media, the controlled media, wanted to just focus on, oh, he wasn't really hurt. It was just a little nip on his ear, and that's all they wanted to focus on. Let's get to what really happened with the Secret Service there. Tell us.
Listen, the media loves us, okay? And somebody died. Somebody almost got, President Trump almost died. It's just, it's horrible.
Horrible.
But look, Kim Cheadle, okay, Director Cheadle, she had no business. She did the right thing by leaving like right away. I mean, look, when that poor kid in Disney got attacked and killed by that alligator, the CEO of Disney was in Japan. He was back in Orlando within 24 hours. I mean, that's the leadership. There was no leadership there. Yes, the drone was not working. Yes, it had HSI there, more HSI people who are great investigators, but they're not protection agents. They're helping out than the Secret Service. So what happens when your bubble gets smaller because of manpower? You rely more on other people, other agencies like the Butler PD. So they're strapped. Their bubble is shrunk, and quite honestly, all that stuff going wrong. Communications was an issue. Manpower was an issue. But Butler PD was assigned to that AGR building. Okay, it was the colonel from state police. I think his name is what the heck is it? Colonel Paris. He testified that Butler PD was in charge of the AGR building. They left their post. You can Google it. They left their post. They would have seen that guy on the rooftop if they did not leave their post. Why they left it, we'll never know. Whatever information they provided. But
Come on, give conspiracy, Vin. Why did they leave the post, Vin?
I don't know. I've heard 17 different. I heard 17 different things. But
give us your favorite. Give us your favorite.
If that was really an issue, and you hear cops yelling, "I told the Secret Service to post there." Well, then why didn't you post somebody there? You had somebody testifying he's the SWAT commander and this with this big giant resume. If you feel that the Secret Service isn't doing the right thing and that is your area, then post it. Put your medical personnel there. Put your fire truck there. Put your ambulance there.
Absolutely.
Post an additional guy. But it's known that they left their post. And what happens? The Secret Service has to take this hit because, number one, it's their responsibility. Right. And number two is if they go out and they say, hey, it was police department's fault. Do you think NYPD is ever going to, work with them again?
Right.
Or Miami PD? So they had to take it. I'm not
what
saying
about the work here? Here's a curious question.
Yeah.
Okay. So right after this occurs, we have the agents up on the roof.
Right.
They kill and I should say first kill and then remove the body of the shooter.
Right.
Dylan Roof was that the shooter at the time, I believe.
Remember, yeah.
And so they remove him, and then within the same thing with Charlie Kirk, within such a short frame of time, a few hours, they're hosing down the roof. I'm not understanding what that's about. Vin, can you please tell us why a crime scene is getting cleansed?
I don't know what happened specifically with the cleansing of that roof. And quite honestly, I can't explain. The only thing that I could explain with, Charlie Kirk was that, that campus police or that local police department, they're not used to homicides. They're not used to that. So they're like, oh, let's just clean it up. Let's do this best as we can. Let's knock this and taking down the cameras. So I think I think that would never have happened in New York, in the big cities where there's actually homicide detectives that work these homicide cases. I think that has a little bit of an experience with the local police department with those. But they were stressed out, and
Right.
You had more Homeland Security HSI guys there than Secret Service agents, and they're great. And Amanda, could you put up that badge that I sent you? You have it? Now,
Yeah.
this was sent to me the other day. This is what my friends are going through. They're on TDYs. They're doing borders. They're doing Secret Service. They're helping Transportation Administration. They're being a jack of all trades. We're doing immigration work. They're being spread out. A lot of people don't realize the importance of the HSI agency. They founded El Dorado, the money laundering group, which is like the steamship of all money laundering. We had the R. Kelly case, the P. Diddy case, the El Chapo case. The Maduro arrest was HSI led, and it was built off of proffers and testimony from previous arrests and previous statements. So these guys have legitimate good cases going on, and they're being sent all over the place. So the morale is actually very low too. And Amanda, you have a Wall Street Journal or New York Times article, and you'll see it right there in the top. On the top.
Wow.
Right. Morale is down. I mean, this was back in November, and this is when I was, I went back as a rehard annuity. I went back with 21 years, of international investigations, and here I am now doing, immigration work. And chasing guys and the whole thing, and it's a shame. It's under Trump's directive, and they're trying to bring everybody, bring these agencies up to speed with hiring. And again, you're hiring, and are you lowering the standards? And
Right.
This is the problem that you're having in the government. And there's no incentive for anybody to stay around. There's no incentive for a senior guy to become a supervisor, because the salary is the same. So
Right.
why would they bother? So it seems like it's calming down. Holman's in now taking over the immigration part, which he should have been doing the whole time. He got rid of the roving patrols. Kristi Noem is out. They're wearing body cams. To me, this is
and step back for a hot second about Kristi Noem and why they removed her. I understand there were two shootings, right? So we had the good shooting, and then Preddy, and so both situations had a lot of convoluted, narratives surrounding them. Okay, both people should not have been anywhere near the agents or the things, the mission, the situation that they were trying to manage, but they were, and I think that that's another big problem, is that the states in which this is occurring, especially Minnesota, the local government there and police are not permitted to provide the federal with any type of barrier or distance to keep these people away. So these things happen. They want to blame Noem. They remove Noem. Why? Like, talk to it.
Well, you know what? Listen, when you're at the head and it rolls downhill, you got to take responsibility.
Right.
She didn't. When that second shooting took place, she went on in the air and said, a domestic terrorism caught brandishing his weapon, and then we see the video 30 minutes later. That's not what happened. So. I think that kind of hurt her a little bit.
Okay.
I think her better approach would have been, look, there was a shooting. We need to investigate, and we're gonna see what exactly took place. I know she had a different take than Tom Homan. Her and Stephen Miller were more like, hey, listen, let's go through, let's get as many as we can out. Where Tom Homan was more, hey, listen. Let's focus in on the criminals. So I know there was a little bit of back and forth with that. And sometimes the appearance of whether you think it's right or wrong, the appearance of 5 guys jumping out with a mask may not be the look that you want to establish to the people who are uninformed and not really realizing why are they wearing the mask. And that's the big. You wear a mask because it's not because you want to save your family. You don't want to be doxxed. You don't want your kids to be tortured. That's the only reason why that was going on.
Right.
And that's a shame. It's a shame.
And there was
that big
comment by Swalwell, right? That
Oh
he
God.
sent out the threat that
Yeah.
if he's going to revoke the driver's licenses of all the
Right.
masked ICE agents,
Right.
if
What does he talk
let's
about?
see.
He was sleeping with a spy. What is he should keep his
I,
mouth shut. It's
it's
crazy.
so crazy because
Yeah.
it's so true.
Yeah.
Like you were sleeping with the Chinese spies for a while, and that came out. The fact that he's
Right.
still sitting in Congress
Right.
is
Right.
it doesn't make sense. But
The
that
other
I think
thing,
that that's what it is. No accountability.
the other thing is you had border patrol in the interior of the United States, which I probably would not have. I didn't agree with that. I think border patrol has their own set of tactics and rules and how they do it, and I think that puts whether they're doing it correctly or not, the interpretation throughout the country may be negative, and then everybody gets labeled as ICE. So
Right.
during those shootings, it was ICE. What was it? ICE? Was it CBP? Everybody gets jammed in together in these little tiny groups. Nobody knows. Everybody's trained differently. Nobody knows each other. It's kind of, it's kind of like a convoluted, and it turns out to be a dangerous situation. I don't want to go to Minnesota with people who I don't know, where I know it's going to hit the fan at any given moment. I
Right.
mean, the guy who just saved the little kid at JFK Airport, was it JFK? He wasn't an ICE agent. He was an HSI agent assigned to the JTTF. But everybody
Wow.
says ICE agent. So
Right.
there's nobody can determine what agency is what, and I think that's a big problem with this whole thing.
Right, right. And then throwing in what is it they have to take over for the TSA agents? They were replacing them with the
Yeah,
DHS. Is that
yeah,
what
yeah,
they were
yeah.
sending in?
So HSI
Double
is now,
duty.
roaming around. Now they're taking, TSA, they're getting trained from them, to help out
Yeah.
with that. They're not wearing masks, and now nobody has a problem with them being in the airport.
Right.
Outside of the political standpoint, but my friends at the airport, nobody's harassing them. They're just, they're just there for, just to kind of, help them get through the lines.
Right.
So
And so, and that's what we're seeing. It's like the reason the we have a budget right hold right now is
right,
because the Democrats want to defund
right,
right DHS. Is that correct? Is it DHS
yeah.
or is it so they
It,
want to
it's yeah, it's they're
defund
close.
any type of homeland security, but at the same time now it's like, oh, okay, but they're at the airports and they're
But
helping
but
out.
but but it doesn't make sense because
No.
this ICE it was funded by the big beautiful bill. So
Right.
that you could complain all you want, it's still being funded. Now you can negotiate on how they're acting and the policies and procedures. But you shouldn't shut it down. You shut it down. ICE is still performing their duties. So it's already funded. It,
Yeah.
it's mind blowing. You try and say it's a common sense approach to things, and you try and stay neutral. And sometimes you just sit back and go, "What is everybody thinking here? This doesn't make any sense."
No, it just seems like really nonsense roadblocks so that Democrats can get talking points and
Yeah,
be
that's
able to
all it
say
is.
you can't do this and you can't do that. And
Right.
when it comes down to it, don't get me wrong. I'll say it on both ends. There's issues with the Republicans and issues with the
Of
Democrats on
course.
certain things, but
Of
this is about the
course.
safety of our country. Let the politics fall away sometimes.
Oh
But
my
when you
God.
don't, that's when the whistle should be blowing on
Right.
you, and that's when the focus should be on you.
This
So
will stop. This will stop when somebody puts into effect that Congress will not get paid like everybody else, and this will never happen again.
right. Right.
That's it. It'll never happen again.
Ben, in the last few minutes, I do want to just say there
Yeah.
is breaking news that Cash Patel's emails were hacked.
Yep.
Okay, confirmed. An Iran-linked group, the Handala hack team, published over 300 emails and photos from what appears to be Cash Patel's personal Gmail account on March 27th. So the FBI did confirm the breach, and they stated the information is historical in nature and involves no government information. I guess
Okay.
basically just his personal information.
Okay.
And so it was in retaliation after the FBI and DOJ had seized several of the Handala websites earlier in the week. That was the
Right.
way they retaliated.
Right.
But the fact alone that they can get into his Gmail, I think is more of a concern with Gmail.
Of course.
And I know that, right? Right.
Of
And it was
course.
a greater issue. I remember Trump shouting about one of, I think it might have been Anthropic, that they had a deal for security services with the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And they had a stipulation that the Pentagon wasn't allowed to use their AI services if it was used for, two types of like military type of spying on the American people and
Right.
some type of other military maneuver. And, Trump was ticked off about it. And he, said, I think in an ex post, well, we can remove you, whatever it needs to be. And so the thing is that, some people I know are like, well, why wouldn't Trump want to protect America's privacy? I almost feel then that it's like the measles situation, like it's like the COVID situation.
Right.
They're going to scream, we don't want people's, that's why we did it. But meanwhile, they're allowed to survey everything the Pentagon is doing. Anthropic is. And you know what? Let me remove the word Anthropic because I need to confirm that it was that AI usage, but that, or OpenAI or what have you, that was responsible for this Pentagon contract. But they're using that as a means to survey everything our domestic and national security is doing to make sure that their contract wasn't violated. So they could turn around and say, no, we're just making sure he's not spying on the American people because it sounds so great. But the truth is, you're really collecting all the survey data for your own selves.
Of course they are. Listen, it's nonsense. It really is nonsense. There'll be more to follow with his account. Maybe he shouldn't have a Gmail account. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I'm sure after this, Gmail will get a speaking to be like, how could this possibly happen? But right. I mean, they're all after us. They're after you. Either you love cash or you don't, or you hate him. There's no like in between with this guy. So, there's some people, and let's see who funded that. Well, quite honestly, maybe somebody funded that.
Correct.
So
I like to follow that lead. Are you being a conspiracist right now?
Every once in a while. We got 5 minutes. What else?
As we wind down with the weekly whistle, I love to take a focus on Easter week. We promised our viewers we would take a quick focus on that. What's going on? So Huckabee, with the Israeli situation, apparently 4 of the Catholic priests who are in charge of this area of Israel in which the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is situated, which is supposed to be at the site where Jesus was crucified and where his tomb was, because apparently the crucifixion and Jesus's tomb were in close proximity. And so this church was built around that area. And so the understanding is that Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, very beautiful name there, Catholic Patriarch of Jerusalem, and Father Francesco Lelpo oversee this sacred site. There was I guess, a missive about not permitting more than 50 people to attend a prayer service because rescue vehicles are difficult enough to get to this area. And because of Iranian bombardment, they were restricting it. But only 4 of the priests went to do their own personal prayer on Palm Sunday and were told they couldn't go. So this has now blown up because why is Israel stopping the Catholics from this is the high holy season for Catholics, and this has turned the focus on that, and so supposedly Netanyahu's reaching out to come to a compromise of some sort.
Listen, this is going to blow over. I think somebody made a mistake, quite honestly, and I'm sure Trump is going to be like, hey, not for nothing. But this is I mean, it's freedom of religion. And this has got to be. We're helping you guys out way too much. I think someone just made a mistake.
There's been so much concern about, the Catholic and the Christian persecution, mostly as of late. We see Mamdani sending out the prayer call for his own religion right there at Gracie Mansion. So, it's crazy. But at the end of the day, let's hope that we can all have peace, especially around the high holy times for all of us. And on that note, I would also like to say there is some revitalization. There's a young influencer who's been going through all the Catholic churches, I think in New York City, and reviewing them. And some of them, like St. Joseph, supposedly have like a wine and cheese event before the mass. And so Gen Zers have been attending like crazy. The line around the corner to get into St. Joseph's is enlightening at this time.
Awesome.
So
100%.
that's good.
100%.
All right.
All right.
What do you want to say? You want to send us out here, Vin, on our first episode?
Yeah, listen, first episode. Hope you guys liked it. Hope we'll be back next week. It was great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Amanda. Amazing job. Thank you for the patience throughout this time. And Lisa, we'll talk soon, and we'll see you back here on the Weekly Whistle. Awesome.
Sounds good. Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone.